Well, for some analysis, we can welcome Ziad Majed to the program. He's a professor of political science at the American University of Paris. It's great to have you with us on the program today, sir.
Thank
First,
you.
the new interim president has, vowed to unite Syria, but there are still obviously deep divisions that remain, as we see with this recent flare-up of violence. So how would he go about doing this? Where does he go from here?
Yeah. Well, I think the transition is extremely difficult. The country has been through 54 years of dictatorship that instrumentalized the sectarian question. And as you mentioned in your introduction, Assad himself belonged to the Alawite community and has always tried to convince the community that its existence depends on his being in power. So now we're seeing one of the implications of that, and one of the implications as well of the war, in which many Alawite officers were involved in war crimes and crimes against humanity. Of course, that cannot in any case justify the crimes and some massacres that took place in recent days against Alawite innocent civilians by some groups who are seeking revenge, who were part of a military campaign against pro-Assad militias that attacked security forces on Thursday and killed dozens of them. So we are into the complexity of the transition of the post-Assad era, in which the sectarian question, specifically the Alawite question, is imposing itself. There will be many other challenges, but what is important today is to contain the violence and is to impose a transitional justice mechanisms that will end with the mentality of revenge and of killing, mass killing, as we have seen in recent days, and will move into some forms of tribunals, truth and reconciliation commissions, etc. This is what is urgent, and all those who committed crimes in the previous days against Alawite civilians should be, of course, brought to court.
Continuing on what you just said, and I'd also just like to pick your brain on the complexities of this a little bit, because the new Syrian government has in the past insisted that collective punishment on the Alawite community won't be allowed, but we're hearing from at least two human rights organizations that say Alawites, including civilians, are being targeted. I'd like your reading on the situation.
Yes, there are, of course, crimes that were committed against Alawite civilians. There are lots of documents, lots of proofs, lots of names that are circulating with people who are identified with the places where they got killed. So the collective punishment that many were avoiding and were hoping that these kind of escalations will be avoided, whether when it comes to the Alawite issue, whether when it comes to the Kurdish challenge as well. Now we have to face the reality on the ground, in which there is a failure in terms of the peaceful transition, in terms of avoiding any revenge and avoiding getting into actions against civilians. So there are in some villages around Tartus, around Jabli, in Snubra, Jabli, etc. There have been documented crimes, and everyone is now expecting and hoping that those who committed the crimes will be arrested. Definitely the chaotic situation and the fact that the military campaign brought lots of volunteers, lots of non-disciplined groups. Some people evoke even jihadists who took the opportunity and went there while they were isolated before. Thugs probably participated as well in the fights. And on the pro-Assad militia forces, those who are still loyal to the previous regime, there are definitely as well crimes that were committed in the clashes. But the situation is very tense, and today there are some hopes because some initiatives are starting in terms of ending the fights and of liberating those who were taken prisoners or hostages in the previous days.
So there's no doubt it presents a major test for the new government's authority, but does this raise then the specter of a larger sectarian conflict in Syria?
It's maybe too early to say whether we are going into a large-scale sectarian conflict, but there are for sure tensions in this area that will continue. And now that we have hundreds killed, that will create more and more tension, and violence brings violence. It's a vicious circle. There is also a tension in southern Syria with some Druze militia. Many of them do not trust for the time being the authorities in Damascus, and they are looking into a kind of either an autonomy or a discussion about a decentralized Syria. Then you have the Kurdish question. The Kurdish forces continue to control more than 20% of the Syrian territory, and there are negotiations with Damascus about the military reunification of all forces and groups, about decentralized Syria in terms of the administrative decentralization, but also when it comes to sharing resources, oil resources. There are lots of complexities, and Syria is still under sanctions. There is a lack of money, going into the country, a lack of opportunities in the job market, the deconstruction and the deconstruction of the social tissue and the destruction of the physical urban centers in Syria and the infrastructure during the war by the Assad regime. Russia and Iran, its allies, do have as well their consequences economically and socially today. People cannot circulate freely. So there are lots of pressure. And of course, the violence in the coastal area add to all that another dimension, the one related to the lives of thousands of Syrians who feel threatened and don't feel secure in the current transition.
Professor Majed from American University of Paris, it's great to have your analysis. Thank you so much for your time today.